Hello and welcome to the latest episode of JRock's Babylon News. This is the news for, believe it or not, folks, January 15th, 2026. Okay, and this is the new expanded edition of JRock's Babylon News. Okay, I had a lot of fun doing this a couple of nights ago. We've been looking for a great way to kind of do the news here, and I think I finally found a great format that works. So please let me know what you think. And once again, I am your host, Jason JRock Houston. Okay, so our first news story for the day involves original Kiss drummer Peter Criss responding to Gene Simmons' claims that Peter had nothing to do with writing the classic Kiss song from 1976, Beth. Now, let's get into this. This is a story we reported on, like I said, just a couple nights ago. This is a story that's been trending. So we're talking about it a little more because since we did the original story, Peter Criss has responded to Gene Simmons' claims. So in a new interview with Billboard magazine, original Kiss drummer Peter Criss told Billboard, Beth holds the distinction of being Kiss's biggest charting hit song, having reached number 7 on the Billboard chart. So basically, what Peter is saying is, the reason he believes Gene is bringing this up is the fact that this it was a band Kiss's biggest hit, according to Peter. Gene and Paul over years have argued about the fact that it actually, in their opinion, that the song "I Was Made for Loving You" charted a lot higher. So I'm not sure, but what I was able this is what this was Peter's response to Gene's claim. Peter also claims that the song was co-written with him and his Chelsea bandmate, the late Stan Pendridge. Now, here's the thing that we talked about a few nights ago when we did this story. Peter Criss, actually was in this band Chelsea in the late 1960s, just prior to joining Kiss with this guy, Stan Pendridge. Now, if you noticed, a lot of the Kiss songs that Peter wrote or was credited with writing throughout his Kiss years, look at songs like Hooligan, Baby Driver, Beth in particular here, and then pretty much Peter's 1978 solo album. Practically all those songs were co-written by this guy, Stan Pendridge. Okay, so first of all, I think there's a little bit of truth on both sides. Now, here's why. Because first of all, in Kiss, Gene and Paul were the main two major songwriters. I mean, if you look throughout the history of Kiss, most of the hit songs were written by Gene and Paul. They were the two main lead singers, so they wrote a bulk of the songs. Now, all the songs, if we just look at Chris's involvement, in Kiss, every song that he ever co-wrote in Kiss was with this guy Stan Pendridge. So I do believe there's a lot of truth to what Gene was saying. Now, again, if we go and look at the kind of the history, the roots of Beth, if you will. Again, it was Peter Criss that brought the song into Kiss. Apparently, the way Gene tells the story is him and Peter were on the way. They were driving together in a limo on the way somewhere, and Peter was humming the song. And Gene naturally asked, "Hey, what's that?" And he says, "Oh, it's a song I wrote in my previous band." And then Gene kind of encouraged Peter to present it to Bob Ezrin and see what Bob Ezrin thought of the song. Bob Ezrin flipped over the song, but according to Peter's interview with Billboard magazine, he goes on to say that Bob Ezrin did kind of greatly add to the song Beth. Now, originally Beth was called Beck, and we're going to get into that a little bit now. Peter Criss explained the song was originally titled Beck, short for Becky, after Chelsea bandmate Mike Brand's wife, who often called during band rehearsal. It was Stan Pendridge who claimed that the original song Beck was based on on his own lyric notes and observations. And Peter had nothing to do with the writing of a song, and that Bob Ezrin wrote the piano part. And so there's never really been any argument about what huge changes Bob Ezrin made to the song. That's why, okay, how the hell is Bob Ezrin credited as a songwriter from, if the song was originally written in the 1960s? Bob Ezrin didn't have anything to do with Peter Criss until they went in the studio in 1976 and recorded the classic Kiss album, Destroyer, of course. And so also Peter goes on to explain that the original song Beck was much more kind of a rock and type of song. And it was actually Bob Ezrin who took it home one night and worked his magic. Bob Ezrin wrote the piano part, and it was Bob Ezrin who decided Beth would be better as a ballad rather than as a rock and tune. So he slowed, I guess Bob Ezrin really paid attention to the lyrics, and he thought the song would be better with his added piano part. And so Bob Ezrin is much more than just a producer. He is also a musician and a songwriter, and that is why a song that was originally written in the 1960s, Bob Ezrin, he alternately changes the sound of the song with his piano part, and so a lot of what Bob Ezrin did really is what made Beth the hit song that we all know it to be today. And it's a song that's been played throughout the history of Kiss. Also, getting back to Stan Pendridge now. So as I said earlier, Stan Pendridge co-wrote all these. If you look at any of the Kiss songs, Peter, except for maybe I think "Dirty Livin'," that was a Peter Criss song, but I think most of the Peter Criss tunes in Kiss were co-written by Stan Pendridge, who we knew from his band Chelsea. I think a lot of the Chelsea stuff, a lot of these songs were written maybe with Chelsea in mind, but of course Peter would go on to join Kiss. And at the time, I think Stan Pendridge saw that he had an opportunity to get many of his songs that he wrote on Kiss albums, and anybody would have a chance to get a good number of their songs on Kiss album. Publishing had to have been pretty good back in the day, and so I could see why Stan Pendridge would kind of make a deal with Peter. Okay, well, Peter, if you'll get Kiss to record some of these songs I've written, I'll agree to credit you as a songwriter. I could see why he would go along with it. And so again, and you can't blame Peter. This is a music business, and that's a very common thing. Oftentimes people in the music business, they get credited for writing songs that maybe they really didn't write. I mean, many of the guys that were in Ozzy's band over years, like Bob Daisley, Lee Kirksley, Jakey Lee, they were actually the ones that were writing the songs and were the real songwriters. But because it was Ozzy's band, he got the big chunk of the publishing. He also was listed as a songwriter, even though the other guys maybe really wrote the songs. That's how it works sometime in the music business, as they say. And so at the time, I could imagine being Stan Pendridge saying, okay, well, wow, my songs are going to get put on a Kiss album. That's good for me. I'm going to make some money off of publishing, thanks to Peter, being in Kiss, I'm getting this opportunity. So at the time, it was something I think it was a good deal for both of them, and of course, Peter, much like what Gene's saying, typically, unless you're talking about like a Roger Taylor or Don Henley or even Phil Collins, typically drummers don't write, aren't too involved with the songwriting. And Gene was saying something about, because basically you can't, according to what Gene Simmons was saying, you can't really copyright a drum beat, but you can copyright like lyrics and a riff or something like that, but not so much a drum sound. So like Don Henley, and all these other guys I mentioned, they're very prolific songwriters. And so like even a guy like Don Henley, even though he's a drummer, he also is he's also lead singer. And so a guy like Don Henley is involved with the lyric writing. A guy like Phil Collins is very much involved with the lyric writing, even though he's a drummer. So, and even Carmine Appice, he's a producer, and he's also been involved with a lot of the lyric writing for the songs that he's been a part of. So, there are some exceptions to the rule, but again, I believe, Stan Pendridge, he never got to maybe the level of that even Peter Criss got in his career, but through his friendship and association with Peter Criss, he probably had opportunities to like appear at some of these Kiss conventions over the years, and just because he had that Kiss connection with some of these songs, the Kiss fans probably, I would imagine, knew who Stan Pendridge was just based on the fact that he had his songs on Kiss albums. And of course, that's probably the biggest thing Stan Pendridge did in his life or his career, because I know over the years, besides writing these songs with Peter that wound up on many Kiss albums, again, like Hooligan, Beth, Baby Driver, all the songs pretty much off of Peter's 1978 Kiss solo album. Stan Pendridge was involved with most of the writing on those songs. I also know after Peter left Kiss, Stan Pendridge wrote many of the songs on both of Peter's early 1980 solo albums, Out of Control and Let Me Rock You. They continued to work together off and on over years. I think they worked together like up until 1984. They tried to put a band called the Chris Pendridge Alliance together. They did a few live shows, but I think from what I was able to do some research on it, came across the fact that they kind of had their differences over years, and they really, after doing the Chris Pendridge Alliance, they kind of went their separate ways. Stan Pendridge, I was reading, went back to Texas, where he was from, and started producing other artists and writing songs for other artists. Nothing that really even was on the level or as successful as these songs that he had on Kiss records, So Stan Pendridge apparently sadly died, I believe, of a heart attack in 2001. And I was able to find on the internet pretty much in 2001, one of the final interviews Stan Pendridge gave, he said that pretty much like in regards to Beth, it was a song he wrote. The song was based off of his lyric notes and observations, and Peter had nothing to do with the writing of the song. And then he pretty much added that when Bob Ezrin got involved, he added the piano part, and that's why Ezrin's credited as a writer. But Stan Pendridge kind of backed up what Gene Simmons was saying, which was the only reason Peter is credited as a writer because they were in Chelsea together, and I guess Peter was made some kind of deal with Stan. Okay, Stan, we'll get these songs on a Kiss album, and if we do, we split the publishing, and you include me, you give me some writing credit, and I think it worked out for everybody involved. So that's that in regards to all the stuff going on about the song Beth, and whether or not Peter Criss was really a writer. I don't think it really matters. I mean, I think pretty much Stan Pendridge and Gene Simmons tell the same story. Of course, at this point, it makes sense that Peter kind of responded the way he did, like, oh, Gene's just being ridiculous. I don't know why he's bringing this up. Gene wasn't there, back in the late 60s when the song was written. It was originally called Beck, but Gene has said over years, and other people have said that, he was the one not only suggested that Peter bring Beth to, Beck, and let Bob Ezrin hear it. Ultimately, Ezrin liked it. It got on the album. Ezrin did his magic. Peter never said that he wrote the lyrics. So I think pretty much what Gene and Stan Pendridge say kind of really line up. So, but again, Peter got listed as a songwriter in all these Stan Pendridge songs. So again, I think it was a deal that worked out for everybody involved. And so, who really cares? I don't know if it even matters, but that's kind of one of the leading rock-related stories going on the internet right now. So that's why we continue to talk about it, and we'll see next time when we do one of these episodes if if it's still being talked about. But again, there's so much other stuff to talk about. So moving on to our next story. Okay, on January 14th, 2026, Black Label Society, fronted by Zakk Wylde, released the first single and music video from the band's new album. Okay, the single and the music videos for the song "In the Name of Blood" from the band's upcoming album, Engines of Demolition. Man, I just love that title. Black Label Society is a band I've always loved. And what I really loved about the band is every album they've ever put out, it really kind of has a personality of its own. There's always a progression with every new release Black Label Society puts out. And of course, Zakk Wylde is kind of the main star, obviously, of Black Label Society. I mean, to me, he's a triple threat. He's a great lead singer, songwriter, guitarist, keyboard player. He can play the piano. He can do it all. And here's the thing. How many of you remember back in 1987 when Zakk Wylde first came on the scene? Okay. And he joined the band, replacing Jakey Lee, new guitar player at the time, in Ozzy Osbourne's solo band. Zakk Wylde looked very different if you go back and you look go on the internet and do an image search for Zakk Wylde back in 1987 when he first joined Ozzy's band. His hair was he had really big hair. He was from New Jersey. He looked like a skinny version of John Bon Jovi. I mean, he looked nothing like he does now. All these years later, in 2026, Zakk is still going strong. He's now got his own band, Black Label. And like I said, I can't wait to get the new album because every release they put out, the band keeps progressing and kicks ass, it gets better and better. And the thing I love about Black Label, they deliver the metal goods, but Zakk Wylde is a super talented guy, like I've been saying, and I love the fact that he can do, he can crank out a great metal, really heavy kind of Sabbathy metal tune, and then he can also do like a beautiful ballad like "In This River," which was a tribute to the fallen Dimebag Darrell Abbott, who Zakk was super close with. They were really good friends, and for years there was talk about if Pantera was ever to reunite, that Zakk would be the perfect guy to kind of fill Dimebag's shoes. I mean, a lot of this was because the two were so close, they were really good friends, that people thought that if Dime would want to see anybody filling his shoes, it would probably be Zakk Wylde. And for the longest time, it was something that was just talked about. But sadly, since the death of Vinnie Paul, Pantera is back without either of the Abbott brothers. But we got, of course, Phil Anselmo fronting the band. We got bassist Rex Brown, and now we got Zakk Wylde filling in for Dimebag Darrell, and we got, of course, Anthrax drummer Charlie Benante on drums. Now, Pantera's been out there. They touring again for the last several years. There's talk about that there may eventually be a Pantera live album. I'd love to see that. Again, it'd be kind of interesting also to see if Pantera was to ever go in the studio and record any new music. And I think Pantera fans, there's two schools of thought. I mean, there's the thought that for many diehard Pantera fans that it's not really Pantera without Vinny and Diamond. And then unfortunately, they both passed on, and there's never going to be any chance of those guys ever being in Pantera again. So, if we believe what Phil Anselmo and Rex Brown are saying, that they've decided to carry on Pantera without the brothers, and a big part of the show is paying tribute to the brothers. And so I think there's probably about 50% of the Pantera fans out there would love to see this lineup of the band go in the studio and see what it would be like to cut a new full-length album. I think it'd be very interesting too. It's not the original band. It never can be, but I think very much like after the plane crash of Lynyrd Skynyrd, at one point you only had Gary Rossington, who he was a sole original remaining band member for several years before he died finally. And Leonard Skinner's became to this thing where it's kind of they're still carrying the Skinner flag. These other guys are in the band. There's not a single original member. And then you've got Ronnie Van Zant's little kid brother, Johnny Van Zant, that's been filling in for big brother Ronnie all these years. And that's why he was so accepted by the fans. But Skinner's still out there doing it. So I think if they can do it, maybe there's hope for a new Pantera studio album. So let's see what happens with that, you know? And then also on the new Black Label Society album, there's a song that Zach wrote in tribute to Ozzy Osbourne called Ozzy Song. So I'm really waiting to hear what that is. And again, the album comes out, let's see, March 27th. So be on the lookout for that, you know. And then also in a couple of weeks, you know, there's going to be, in fact, next 1 week from tomorrow, we're going to have a new Megadeth album. So we'll be talking about that probably the next time we do one of these news reports. So, okay, now also, last time we did JRock's Babylon News, we were talking about the fact that singer Paul Shortino was talking about the Quiet Riot album that he played on in 1988, excuse me. And of course, that was the only Quiet Riot album to feature a singer other than Kevin DuBrow. And so at the time, many fans, you know, had a mixed feeling about the 1988 Quiet Riot album. First of all, it was called Quiet Riot, and a lot of people, they just could not see Quiet Riot without Kevin DuBrow. So it was hard for many of the Quiet Riot fans to even accept that it was a Quiet Riot album. You know, Kevin DuBrow was no longer there. Who's this new guy, Paul Shortino? You know, of course, Paul Shortino came from Rough Cut, but recently Paul gave an interview to Metal Rules, and he was talking about the fact that he and former Quiet Riot guitarist Carlos Cavazo are trying to get the rights back to the song so they can own the publishing to these songs that they were very much involved with, and that he didn't really go into detail, but said that there may be a problem with re-releasing the album in its current form because Frankie Banali's widow, Regina, owns basically all the Quiet Riot music and anything that has Frankie's drum tracks on it. And so I think they were having some problems with her agreeing to have Frankie's tracks on the album unless she was paid or something for it, and rightfully so. I think if they're going to do that, she deserves to get paid for it. But and Paul didn't really go into why, but he was mentioning in the interview that they're working on getting him and Carlos working on getting the publishing rights and the rights to the album. Sony Music, he made a point that currently owns the rights, but they're trying to work with them to get the rights back. And if they're able to do that, Paul said him and Carlos are planning to re-release the album with maybe a couple bonus tracks. And he was toying with the idea of maybe they weren't able to use Frankie's drum tracks, having Carmine Appice, who of course, legendary drummer, and there's no doubt that Carmine could handle a task like this, I think. But I think a lot of the reason he's thinking of Carmine is that him and Carmine worked together in the band King Cobra over the last couple of years. And so Carmine's probably somebody he's really close with. And again, I'm sure Paul has no doubt that Carmine could do something like this. But then again, a few days later after we report on this, Paul Shortino comes out and he kind of tries to take back some of these comments. And he said, well, I never really said that I was going to replace the drum tracks. He said, actually, he said, that's why I don't give too many interviews. He goes, because when I do, a lot of times things get twisted around. And he says, I don't even know that I'd be able to have a drum tracks re-recorded for the simple fact that none of them were actually recorded with a click track. He says, so technically that may turn out to be impossible. So again, this is a story we continue to follow, and we will see if it develops anymore. So I just wanted to give you guys that little bit of update. And again, many people felt that the album Would it sold better had they called it anything else but Quiet Riot? Only Quiet Riot album, again, not to feature Kevin Dubrow. So there's that. Now, Paul Shortino has recently walked back his comments, as we said, and so that's all I have to say about the Quiet Riot situation. And again, it's funny that we're talking about a Quiet Riot album came out in 1988, and I'm glad to see that we're talking about it because again, it was a pretty solid album, but I think it just didn't get the attention that it maybe deserved because again, calling it Quiet Riot, many fans had a problem with that, but it was a different sound. But anytime you change a singer in a band, but I think people need to learn to kind of open their ears and kind of not be so judgmental. It's a shame when that album came out, more people didn't at least put it on. Probably my favorite track off that album is the one that was the single, "Stay With Me Tonight." That was also kind of a very different sounding type of song for Quiet Riot, but it fit Paul Shortino's voice, and I think so. I'm glad that we're talking about an album that came out in 1988 that kind of has been forgotten about. It'd be cool that if they were able to get the rights back to re-release this with some bonus tracks, because that's another thing I always love. When some of these classic albums, well, I shouldn't say classic album because this album really didn't chart that well. It didn't sell all that well. But again, it's one of those albums that it's kind of a solid album. It has some pretty good songs. Didn't necessarily sound like a Quiet Riot album, but I don't know. I don't know if that's a bad thing. It fit Paul Shortino's voice and what he was all about, and I think that's what really matters. And sometimes albums like this kind of fall under the radar, and it's cool when an opportunity comes to re-release something, and maybe it'll get a little more attention than it initially did. Now, again, and I think it'd be cool if they're going to do it. Another cool thing would be to throw on some extra bonus tracks because again, I think it's cool. It's always cool to get something a little extra. As a fan, I always dig stuff like that. Well, oh man, they threw on some bonus tracks. This was on the original release, but man, I don't have this, so can't wait to check out these new bonus songs. I don't know what's going to be. It could be like a demo recording. It could be a live recording or something. But whatever the case may be, I'm always in for stuff like that because I thought, wow, if you want a little something extra, that's always cool to get a little something extra that maybe you didn't have before. So there's that. And again, like I said in the last news report, I really got mixed feelings as far as that'd be another cool thing to have Carmine and Peace come in and re-record the drum tracks. I mean, for that reason alone, it would kind of become more of a collector's item because it's a re-release of an album that was previously out. It's got some new bonus tracks, Carmine and Peace, re-recording the drum tracks. For that reason alone, it would make it kind of like more of a collector's item type of thing. But I got mixed feelings again because Frankie Banali is no longer with us. He's passed on, and I don't know how I feel about having his drum tracks re-recorded and put out there. When Frankie was initially, on the album, I would love to see that if maybe Paul and Carlos and Regina could come to some kind of agreement. Again, I don't know everything that's going on, just what's been reported. So I'm just kind of putting my opinion out there. And I do think, when things like this happen, it's very sad. Or the other cool thing to do would be to like have two versions. Okay, let's keep the original release that features the original drum tracks with Frankie. If you want to do kind of a reimagined type of thing like George Lynch did with Lynch Mob a couple years ago, and they did a reimagined version of the debut album Wicked Sensation, maybe do that. And again, something like that is it's not the original recording, but it's like an alternative version. So if fans want the original version with the original band, they can have that. They want to get this new version featuring Carmine Apiece, doing some new drum tracks for then they got both versions, and I think people can then check out both versions and make up their own mind. Now, as you guys know, I also love I love all kinds of pop culture stuff. I love watching classic TV shows, and and what I got to report now, this is kind of a fun thing to look back on. The Batman TV show starring Adam West, Burt Ward, premiered on ABC on January 12th, 1966. And that turns 60 years old this week. Oh man, do I feel old. First of all, when I originally caught the Batman TV show, I caught it in reruns. I wasn't even alive in the 1960s, folks. So I didn't even come into the world till July 4th, 1971. So by the time I was a kid and I caught the Batman TV show, I was catching it in reruns. And let's be honest, for many, many years, Adam West, that was my Batman. That was my version of Batman. Okay. And I'll tell you, I just love the show so much, and we're going to get into it. The show had 120 episodes. The show was only 3 seasons long. And what I've read over years, the reason there's only 3 seasons, the show was extremely popular, and it wasn't just popular with kids; it was popular with grown-ups. Parents and grandparents would watch it at the dinner table. They would watch it with the kids. It was a real family affair. Batman, this is way before The Dark Knight, but going back to Adam West, that was my Batman for many, many years, and that was my image of what Batman was. Of course, Batman has had many versions at this point in 2026, but for me and many people, that Adam West version of Batman, that was Batman for many, many people, and even though there's been many different versions of Batman, and many of them are more dark, and many of them are much more advanced, I tell you, that's ultimately the Batman that I still love. That's the Batman I grew up on, and and so let's get into it, folks, because there's so much here to talk about. In 1966, Batman TV series was very campy, loaded up with comic book bright colors and over the top exaggerated acting. Pow, wow, wow, and all that stuff. I loved all the villains. Probably my favorite villain, I don't know, I go between the Cesar Romero's Joker and the Penguin. I think ultimately, like a lot of people, I love the Joker. That was my ultimate Batman villain. I mean, I love them all: the Riddler, Joker, Penguin, Catwoman. But the Joker was my favorite, and Cesar Romero as the Joker. Man, what a great job that guy did as the Joker. I mean, the Joker was very much campy. The Joker was a fun villain. He laughed, he smiled. I mean, he was extremely kind of this evil, dangerous guy, but he was laughing and joking, and man, that's why the Joker like really stood out to me. And one thing I always remember about watching the Batman TV show back in the day was each episode it would end and it would say, like same, tune in next time, same bat time, same bat channel, and again, I would as the show is ending, and I know that's coming on, I would say that line for line. Tune in next time, same bat channel, same bat time, and man, also I remember every episode as it would start, I would get into singing the theme song, and it wasn't even really Batman. Yeah, get all into it. You can see I'm even getting into it now. Man, but yeah, what wonderful memories, I just tell you. And so also another thing was talking about today, January 15th, a 1991 David Lee Roth solo album that came out is celebrating its 35th anniversary. Now, folks, let's talk a little bit about this classic David Lee Roth solo album. It's one of those albums that kind of been forgotten about. It's kind of flown under the radar for many, many years. it's been many years since it came out, 35, like I said, to be specific. Now, this was a real special album because it was probably the third and final kind of most commercially successful David Lee Roth solo album. And at the time, okay, the band featured the Bissonette brothers, which was Matt Bissonette, the younger brother, on bass guitar, his older brother Greg on drums, and then we had two really hot shot guitar players were on this a real bluesy kind of rhythm guitarist, Steve Hunter, of course, many people know from the Alice Cooper band in the 1970s. And also on lead guitar, we had a very young Jason Becker. I think when Jason Becker recorded this album, he was like 19, 20 years old. And sadly, Jason Becker was very involved in the co-writing of these songs with Dave. But as the album was being recorded, Jason Becker became very ill. He started having these symptoms. He wasn't sure what was going on. He had trouble playing. Come to find out, at the ripe old age of 19 years old, he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And I think if for anything else, Steve, the previous guitar player was with Dave, Steve Vai. He left after the release of the Skyscraper album. Steve Vai was, of course, on Eat 'Em and Smile and Skyscraper. And after the Skyscraper tour, Steve Vai left to join Whitesnake, okay? And Dave wanted to get another flashy lead guitar player. And Jason Becker was this guy that was kind of on the rise at the time. He was starting to make some serious noise. And sadly, by the time the album is out, he's diagnosed with this disease. He's told at the time that he's probably only got a couple years left to live. And I will say that, Jason's health really kind of went down from that point on. But let's keep in mind, like I said, at the time, back in 1991, after the album's recorded, band's getting ready to hit the road, Jason is diagnosed with this awful disease, Lou Gehrig's disease. He's told he's just probably got a couple months left to live. Well, folks, 35 years later, Jason Becker is very much still alive. He's living with his parents. There's a great documentary that Jason and his family put out, Not Dead Yet. I got it as a super documentary, and it shows people kind of how Jason makes music with the use of computers. And him and his father created this thing where he uses his eyes to kind of command the computer what he wants to do. Very amazing. But and it just the fact that Jason's able to continue to make music this way, you just have a great new level of respect for a guy that's, he's had all these struggles, and yet he continues to make this beautiful music. So that's kind of a side story of A Little Ain't Enough. And of course, like I said, Steve Hunter, 1970, played with Alice Cooper. He's a featured rhythm guitar player on the album. Now, when the band went and toured on the road, Jason Becker was out of the band because he just couldn't tour with the band because he had been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, as I said. And then I'm not sure why Steve Hunter didn't go on the road with the band, but so by the time David Lee Roth goes on the tour to support this album, he still got the Bissonette brothers in the band. And then on guitar, he gets Joe Holmes, who was an unknown guy at the time. And after playing with David Lee Roth, Joe Holmes would play for a couple years in Ozzy Osbourne's solo album. Interesting enough, though, Joe would never, record an album with either Dave or Ozzy, but he toured with these guys, and he really kind of became a household name once he got in Ozzy's solo band. So there's that. And then Desi Rex was a rhythm guitar player that toured with Dave, who of course was a frontman and guitar player from the band Demal. So you kind of had a different version of the band doing the live show when it came time to tour behind the album. So there's that. And I just kind of wanted to end the newscast with that, talking about the fact that this is the 35th anniversary of this great classic David Lee Roth album. Also in 1991, the music climate was changing. This was this was around the time Nirvana would hit with "Smells Like Teen Spirit" and the Nevermind album, and once that came out, the mainstream, what everybody really shifted to listening to is, so this kind of 80s rock was kind of on the way out, and Nirvana and alternative music and grunge was on the rise, and it become the new fresh sound for many years. Probably about a 10-year span. So David Lee Roth, releases A Little Ain't Enough, right, as all that's happening. And I think it was probably Dave's last great super sounding solo album. I think, probably my two favorite David Lee Roth albums would have to be Eat 'Em Smile and A Little Ain't Enough. Now, I really like Little Ain't Enough. I mean, A Little Ain't Enough it wasn't like just such a solid rock album, even though it was a solid rock album, featured great Jason Becker riffs, but also it had a little bit of a blues feel. I mean, the three singles that were released from the album, of course, were the title track, A Little Ain't Enough. There's a music video for that. I really love the video. That was a great song to kind of kick the album off with. It's a great way to, I really love the fact that that's the number one track on the album. It kicks the album off. The video's like nothing but fun. It's kick ass. Really great tune. I think in many ways very underrated. A lot of people kind of that's a song that really should have got a lot more attention than what it did. I think that's a song that could have maybe been on a Van Halen album even. And probably I like a lot of other tracks, but probably my second favorite track would be Sensible Shoes. There's also a video for that. You can go on YouTube and check out, but Sensible Shoes had a really kind of bluesy kind of, not really, but it was a real blues tune. And man, it was at the time I remember thinking that was really a different kind of sound for Dave, but Dave, he mastered it. And so I got to give him credit. 35 years later, we're still talking about the album. So, man, I had a lot of fun doing this latest edition of JRock's Babylon News. Thanks for checking it out, you guys. And there's more on the way. Be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, because that's the only way you're going to find out about all our latest episodes. And there's more stuff on the way. So thanks for allowing me to do this and supporting what we do. We're here to entertain you, and I hope we do that. So this is your host, Jason JRock Houston, signing off. Take care. We'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.